will defrag your mind of propaganda-ridden viruses induced by mass media news programming. No BS here, just the facts.
And now we present to you America's quintessential iconoclastic anomaly. Wow. In talk radio, your host, Joe Cristiano.
Welcome, everyone, to Liberty Talk Radio, America's libertarian voice, broadcasting from our studio in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to around the world. I'm your host, Joe Cristiano, and this is your antidote to popular talk radio. Today, we're pleased to have as our guest Nicholas Sarwark. He's the Libertarian Party Committee Chairman, National Chairman, and we're going to be discussing the progress of the Libertarian Party, where we are, where we're going, and probably discuss where the Libertarian stands on some of the issues that are being discussed on, especially during the debates that I call them debates. I should bite my tongue when I say that. During the circus clown acts that we have on television, which we call debates. Nicholas, thank you very much for being on our program.
Thank you so much for having me on.
All right. I normally don't have people better looking than I am, but I made an exception this time. Okay?
I appreciate you making that exception.
Now, Nicholas, I know you were on RT TV a day or so ago, depending on the hours, how we calculate them. And what I find absolutely amazing is that rarely does a libertarian get any airtime at all on American national television. And yet the typical American perceives Russia as a closed-loop system where nothing but party ideology is discussed, and the last thing they would want anyone of a persuasion of individual rights and liberty to be on their program. Yet you're on Russian television, but I bet you have the darndest hardest time trying to get on U.S. television. Am I correct, or am I losing my mind? Well, no, I lost my mind a long time ago, but am I continuing to lose my mind, I should say?
It is. It seems more common for me to get invitations to be on foreign media than the United States media. And a lot of what that comes down to is what message they're trying to push. Russian television has a bias, and I have a friend who actually works for the Department of State who, after my interview, this was the second year in a row they've had me on after the State of the Union, said, you shouldn't go on RT. They're just a propaganda outlet for the Russian position. And I told him, I said, I understand that they've got a bias and they're trying to push the Russian line. But, after we lowered some of the strictures of the embargo against Cuba, I was on Radio Marti, which is the Voice of America propaganda arm that broadcasts into Latin America and Cuba. So, I told him, I said, I'm willing to be on any state media because I feel like getting our message out is more important than me saying, I'm not going to talk to you, or I'm not going to talk to you because of some other positions you have. And RT is very open to a lot of alternative viewpoints as long as you don't step on a couple of what I'd call sensitive subjects, right? As long as we don't get into Ukraine, they're pretty open. And, the host, if you watch the interview, focused a lot on the international policy, the foreign policy, the military stuff, areas of interest to a Russian viewer, but it does let us have the opportunity to spread that libertarian message as far and as wide as we can. And so that's what I try and do.
Well, I couldn't agree more. Now, good thing he didn't ask me that question, because at my age, I don't care. You should care a lot more than me. But I would say, okay, Harry, that's very nice. I said, I'll agree not to be on Russian television. Put me on U.S. television.
Right. You give me some invites to Voice of America. I'll be on it every time you want me to not be on RT.
Have me on NBC on Monday, CBS on Tuesday, CNBC on Wednesday, and just go right through it. I said, book me up, be more than happy to say, I'd love to be on RTV, but I'm too busy. But they shut you, and then they want to say, well, please don't go anyplace else. I tell you, that takes moxie. That's unbelievable. Anyway, now,
it's because we're an opposition party, right? Voice of America, when we go get people on VOA to broadcast into Europe, we get their opposition parties. Because if we're trying to push against, the government in that country, you have to find people that have some beef, right?
Right.
And so this is not abnormal, and it shouldn't be surprising to anybody that foreign media is going to be more interested in an alternative viewpoint from, the existing politics structure in our country.
Yeah, but just think, the ideology of individual rights and freedom is now the opposition party.
Yes, that's been the message the Libertarian Party has been trying to tell the American people for the last 42 years,
right,
there's not left and right. There's government control and individual freedom, and that's the axis we're on. If you want more government control, there's two whole parties in this country that can hook you up. If you want individual freedom, there's just the one.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have been a member of the Libertarian Party probably for almost as long as you've been on this face of this earth, and a long time, over 25 years. I really don't know how far further than that. And I've been a financial supporter every single month for umpteen years, and I've been to some of the conventions and whatever. In fact, I was at the convention where Wayne Allen Root almost got nominated, which as the candidate to run for president, but I think he lost to Barr.
Bob Barr.
Yeah, Bob Barr, right. And I thought that was, well, neither one are really libertarians, and I was really surprised that they went that route, because we had candidates that carry the message a lot better than those two. But let's not get into that. Now, let me tell you, obviously I'm very frustrated with the Libertarian Party, not people, what they're doing. I mean, everyone's working very, very hard, and I'm in agreement with the message 100%. My friends, people that I know are everywhere from Jacob Hornberger, Paul Jacobs, the Cato Institute crowd. I'm in with all of them.
Right.
I'm on the same page. But a couple of about 3 weeks ago, we had as a guest John McAfee of McAfee Antivirus Software. Now, he wanted to start his own party, but when he realized that he needed to get ballot access over on all 50 states and what it really took to do so, I understand he approached the Libertarian Party to run as a candidate under the Libertarian ticket. And I was wondering, where does that stand?
He has become a member of the Libertarian Party. He's paid his dues, so he is now eligible to be nominated at convention in Orlando Memorial Day weekend this year. He has officially changed his affiliation with the Federal Elections Commission, so he's now listed as Libertarian, no longer independent or unaffiliated. As far as I know, he's going out and he's meeting with state party people. I know that he met with Rep. Pajunas, the state chair of the Nevada Libertarian Party, recently, and did some events out there coinciding with the Consumer Electronics Show. And so, as far as I know, he is a serious candidate for a nomination at this point. Just to be clear, when the direction that the national office staff has from me with regard to presidential politics is we are all scrupulously neutral. I will give advice to any candidate who seeks the Libertarian nomination. I'll tell them exactly what they need to do. If they ask me for pointers and say, what would be a good strategy, I'm more than happy to share that, and I share it equally. But we don't pick favorites. We don't put the thumb on the scale. You've been around long enough to remember the name of Harry Brown.
Oh, absolutely,
so
yes.
You know kind of that in the past, the national office has been less neutral, and that didn't work out so well. So, we go above and beyond to make sure we're fair to everybody.
Well, because John McAfee admitted, he said, I'm almost all libertarian. He says, I'm almost libertarian. I think that's the term he used. And I'm not certain. We never got into what areas were non-libertarian, because everything he said on the program, actually, I agreed with it. There was very, very little that I disagreed with. And are there any chasms there, between his philosophy and libertarian philosophy?
Not so much that I've seen. The only thing I've heard people tell me about, because I haven't gone really deep into his platform, I figure the delegates will probably spend a lot more time with his platform than I will. I know that he has some views on cybersecurity, which I'm sure he comes by honestly from his history as a leader in that area, some of which might involve some government action that maybe a more hardcore libertarian would not agree with.
Right.
But I don't think there's a lot there. There are other candidates I've talked to, at least, some fairly high-profile names that you would know if I wanted to disclose them, who left the old parties and stopped running with one of the old parties, who have talked to us about, the logistics of running as a libertarian. What do you have to do? And I've been very frank with them. The money is definitely an issue. You're talking somewhere on the order of magnitude of between $5 and $10 million to run an independent candidacy in the United States, just to get on the ballot in most states, not all of them, just most. And the Libertarian Party is likely to, once we turn in the signatures in Oklahoma, we're likely to be back on in Oklahoma for the first time since the year 2000. And we're gonna probably hit 50 states, and you can get that by being nominated. So that's a huge upside for candidates. I've just had to tell them, look, the party remembers Bob Barr, they remember Wayne Root, and they're very skeptical of people who try and come to the party and use it as a vehicle for their own ends.
Right.
This is not something where the national committee is going to put our thumbs on the scale for you. You're not going to broker any backroom deal to get the nomination. You have to go from state to state and convention to convention and convince ordinary libertarian delegates to support you if you want the nomination. And that's shocking to people who come from old party politics, because they're used to, if I rub the right people the right way, they'll just make this thing happen for me.
Right.
And the Libertarian Party is so different from that. We have a real convention where we really fight it out on the floor.
Right.
And I couldn't tell you today who's going to be the nominee. I would not feel comfortable predicting.
Yeah. Well, the last time I ran for office was for U.S. Congress in the year 2000, because the Libertarian Party was, in fact, a party recognized in Oklahoma. But ever since then, we had no party. It was a very, very difficult ordeal. I can probably spend hours talking about my journey and the frustrations that I faced. I was actually not invited, ignored actually is the word, by of all people, the League of Women Voters. When they had we had a debate, and I was all ready to go, and I noticed that my name wasn't on the board just like a week before, and I called. I said, my name's not there. They said, well, you're not invited. I said, what do you mean? They said, well, of course, the people who were hosting it said, well, it's not us. It's really someone else, and it was the station. The station said it's not us. It's the League of Women Voters. And actually, it was the League of Women Voters that decided not to put me in the debate. And
that's horrible.
Yeah. So the
and kind of shocking, because they've usually been good for most of our candidates in most states. They're the ones. That's part of the reason that the CPD, a bipartisan corporation created between the Republicans and the Democrats, controls presidential debates, because it was the League of Women Voters that stood up and said, we're not going, I think the exact quote they used was, we're not going to participate in a fraud on the American people of this two-party collusion. And so, I'm saddened to hear that in Oklahoma, at least, they didn't live up to their own values.
Well, even if they weren't primarily responsible for it, they didn't fight for me to be on.
Right.
So by association, they're guilty in my book. At no time did anyone say, we're fighting to get you on. We want to make sure this is done right and whatever. I never heard a word from them. I couldn't get through to them. They wouldn't talk to me. But yet in Bartlesville, of which is out of my district altogether, there was a debate, and they asked me to be in Bartlesville, and that made no sense whatsoever. But anyway, a question that was posed to me right before you came on the air was that we've heard so much for months now about the Republican and the Democrat challenges and their positions. The Libertarian Party has been almost absent in this debate and in all the media. It's almost like you guys are disappearing and pop up someday and say, "Here we are," and sprout. How come we have not heard much? And I guess maybe we have, but I'm not using the right vehicles from which to get the information. But it doesn't seem like we have been very, very visible up until now.
a lot of it comes down to how our process works. You know, the advantage of it being a very democratic and open process where it's, you know, state party conventions and state delegates that you have to win over in advance of Orlando. The disadvantage to that is that their state conventions tend to be fairly small events and they're not well attended by media. And so it's a lot more of a behind the scenes ground game than, you know, papering the airwaves in Iowa and New Hampshire with billions of dollars worth of advertising. I think a lot of that's going to change, and you should see some good stuff happen over the next couple of months. You know, the Libertarian Party of Mississippi is going to have a convention at the beautiful Beau Rivage Casino in Biloxi with a 3-camera shoot and a professional debate moderator, where they're going to bring in and have a debate like you've been used to seeing on TV, except they're going to be actual libertarians on the stage. And they're going to have an audience that's going to be not just libertarians. They're going to bring in Republicans and Democrats who may be interested in another option to be part of that audience. And so I think that it's changing slowly. We're going to step up that game. But a lot of what happens is incumbent on the state parties. We're a very decentralized party, and the national party isn't going to, you know, come down from above and say, you have to have a debate in this way, and these are the people to invite. So I think as that process gets going, you should see a little bit more excitement. And as the field winnows on the Republican and Democratic sides, you know, when there are fewer people trying to take all the oxygen out of the room, there's more of an opportunity for a Gary Johnson or an Austin Peterson, John McAfee to kind of get out there and get their message heard, because people are starting to not want the options from the other parties. As long as you've got, you know, 8 people on the Republican stage, for anyone that leans Republican, there's somebody that they're like, oh, I still like that guy. I still want to pay attention to this. When you get that down to 2 or 3 people, there are going to be a lot of disgruntled voters. They're going to say, you know, there's not an option for me. I don't feel like that party offers me anything. They don't even offer me the hope that my guy might get it now. And that's where we'll really get some momentum.
Well, I would suspect that Donald Trump will probably do more for the Libertarian Party than anyone else if we play our cards right. Because what he's done, he said, I'm bringing out all of the anger, all the angst from people who are just totally disgusted with the system. But what they're doing is they're voting back for the system. And if somehow, and I don't know how you convey this message, say, all right, Trump supporters, we hear you. Now here's the real alternative, the Libertarian Party. Do you think we can do that? You think that'll work? You think that'll get enough of attention?
We've been trying, and I know if you watch the press releases from the National Party and stuff, we're trying to take advantage of some of the crazy things that candidates are saying that they're inciting action because they're oftentimes hateful or just so far off the reservation that they get people excited. And we've been trying to sort of turn that to our ends and show people that you can be upset at the system, but there's a more sensible way to kind of go about this. Because what Donald Trump, as you point out, offers is a false promise. He says, I'm totally real and I'm unvarnished and I'll say whatever I mean, and, you know, I mean it, and I'm going to make Mexico build a wall and all sorts of just pretty nutty stuff. But he's doing it under the auspices of probably the most hidebound, just, you know, stuck in last century kind of party. And he's kind of getting those people to stay on the plantation of the Republican Party, right? You know, he's saying, well, I'm gonna release your chains, and he's moving them just from one plantation house to the next.
Right.
And what we need to point out to him is, if you really want to get past it, if you really want to stop voting for people who want to control your life and start voting for people who want to give you back more control, then you have to start voting Libertarian.
Yeah. And, you know, that's a message that the Republican parties and the Democrat parties are doing a terrible job of saying, we want control to be back at the people. They say that sort of, they mention that as almost a platitude. And then when they get into the specifics, everything's exactly the opposite.
Right.
And I think it confuses people. And what really bothers me is probably the average American has lost the ability to think on principle. You know, back in the old days, there were certain things that my family or my grandfather did or didn't do based on principle. And you never compromise principle. And all the parties talk about are, but you have to learn to compromise. I mean, 50 years ago, if you said that, they'd smack you in the head. You know, what's the matter? Your brains rot? You know, you don't compromise. You can never compromise principle. And yet the Libertarian Party is the party of principle, and you cannot compromise that. You can't say, well, I know it's not the right to kill people, but maybe once in a while it's okay. You know, and we'll compromise. I won't kill 10 people this week. I'll kill 4. You know, oh, okay, then now we've compromised. Well, no, you haven't. You've compromised your principle, not your actions. And we need to get that out. If we can get that out, and people can maybe wake up the inner core of people's minds and bring that American principle out again, things that we were brought up with from, well, actually it's not American, it's from the old school, the old country with principle. And then when they listen to all these clowns on the stage and say, they're compromising on everything. I don't agree with any one of them. Even when I agree with the results, I don't like the way they got there, because they're compromising.
I think that's a good point. You have to, and one of the things that we can do as libertarians is paint things with pictures that make it more clear to people what they're really being offered. You know, there's a YouTube video I did a while ago. I was a former public defender, and so I saw the result of an over-criminalization of America, of more things that didn't hurt anyone else being made into crimes and people being locked in cages. And so I did this video talking about how the phrase, there ought to be a law, sounds like, just a thing that you say out of frustration.
Right.
And that the reality is, if you make a law, whether it's a good law or a bad law, then you empower the police to enforce the law.
Right.
If you empower the police to enforce the law, not everybody is going to comply with that enforcement. So you're going to empower the police to use force to make people comply. And people are going to get hurt and people are going to die, whether it's a good law or a bad law. There are people who get shot during murder investigations, but I think there should still be a law against murder. But recognizing that every criminal law you make potentially kills people should make us step back and say, there aren't that many things that are that important. If you look at the tragic case of Eric Garner in New York City, who got choked to death by a police officer for selling loose, untaxed cigarettes, I don't think that any of the people who voted for representatives, who voted for there to be a law to say you can't sell cigarettes without paying tax, if you asked them, are you willing to kill somebody over this? I don't think a single one would say, yeah, I'm willing to kill somebody, but that's what we do.
That's right.
And so it's helping people understand what it is that they're supporting, I think will help people get back to principle. You can't beat them over the head with it. It has to be relatable language, but we also, there's a way for us to present a hardcore libertarian belief without being mean about it, without looking down on people, with recognizing where people are coming from and talking to them in their language, but not compromising what we believe. If you talk about the government's going to kill 10 people, you don't want to be a libertarian and say, I just want to kill 4. That's true. However, if you put me in office and I'm given, 2 laws, two potential bills that are going to pass, and one of them is going to kill 6 less people, by God, I'm going to kill 6 less people. But I'm going to explain to everybody that's not what I want. My beliefs are that we kill nobody. That's what I want.
Right.
There's a difference between compromise when you're in office and compromise on your way to office. A lot of what the old parties have done, and the reason that people are leaving them in droves, there's actually more people not in either of the 2 old political parties than in them in a lot of states in this country, is that they started compromising before there was ever any pushback. Right? It was like in negotiation, they're negotiating against their own position before anyone's ever said no. Like, why are you giving it up before they say no? At least let them push back on you a little bit. And they're like, well, we just don't want to even push that. We don't even want to try for that. Libertarians, we can go out there and say, look, what we want is nothing less than a world set free in our lifetime. We want every individual to be free to do whatever they want, pursue happiness however they like, as long as they don't hurt anyone and they don't take their stuff. That's what we want.
Right.
And then let them come to us with, a counter proposal. Yeah. But let's never lose sight of what we want. What we want is a world set free in our lifetime. That's what we want.
Yep.
That's right there in the statement of principles of the Libertarian Party. It's been there from the beginning, and unless you can convince 7/8 of the delegates at convention to change it, it'll be there forever. And we're getting bigger and stronger every single year, and we're a younger party, honestly. We're a younger party that's growing while the older parties are shrinking. People are leaving them, and they're coming to us.
Right, and that's one of the few things that give me some hope. When I was on 1170 KFAQ, which is probably the biggest talk show program here in the central part of the United States, and when I would tell them that I dislike calling myself a libertarian in Oklahoma because people don't know what that means. And the example I gave, I said, if I say I'm a libertarian, I said, in my own mind, I think they think that I'm one of those gay guys that like to dance in the street in their dirty underwear. I gave that all the time on radio,
right.
And because people have no concept of, you must be one of those weirdo people, you do these weird things that we would never even think of doing. They have no concept of individual liberty, and sometimes I wish we would change the name of the Libertarian Party to something that's more descriptive, and I don't know what that would be, but only because of the misconception that people have.
Right. Well, it's it's kind of like if you go back to the 60s, right? You got the hippies and you got the straights. And that's who it is. You're either a buttoned-up guy in a suit with short hair,
right,
or you're a hippie, smoking weed and wearing beads. The Libertarian Party is about not making that choice. It's about saying that we can have a party, we can have a community, we can have a country where the hippies and the straights can get along fine because the hippies don't try and make the straights into hippies, and the straights don't try to make hippies into straights.
Right. Absolutely.
I'm not going to try and put a hippie in a suit, and the suits aren't going to try and take the hippies out of their beads. That's the thing about the libertarians, that it's the amount of respect that you have to have for your fellow human beings to be a libertarian, because you respect their right to make choices that you wouldn't make.
Right.
That's the difference. A Republican may not approve of a gay guy dancing in his underwear in the streets. And he'll try and pass a law to make sure that no gay guys can be in the streets in their underwear.
Right,
That's totally
exactly.
illegal. We'll lock him in a cage if you do that.
His dirty underwear, by the way.
Yeah, dirty underwear. A libertarian can also think, that's a pretty terrible idea, and I don't like it, and I wouldn't do it, and I would tell my kids not to do it. But say, you know what? It's none of my business, because it's not me. As long as he doesn't try and get me to come dance with him, we're good.
Right.
That kind of respect for your fellow human being is the beautiful nature of the Libertarian Party. There was a speaker at the Washington State Convention who I think we've been able to get for the national convention, but he gave this beautiful speech that almost brought me to tears about the idea that society is a garden. Everyone has a garden, and they plant all kinds of different flowers in their own garden. And the only rule is you can't take from someone else's garden. You can't rip up their roses because you think daffodils are prettier. You can't take some of their soil because you think your plants are better. Everybody gets to grow their own garden in their own way. And if somebody wants to let their garden get overgrown with weeds because they think it looks better, and you want yours to be perfectly trimmed hedges, that's fine. As long as you don't cut my weeds, I won't mess up your hedges.
Right.
That is the society that we want, where every garden blooms in its own way. And that's what I think America was founded on, and that's where I think the Libertarian Party is helping to get America back to where it was.
Yeah. But, the retort to that is, what about those unfortunate people who are incapable physically, mentally, or whatever to grow their own vegetables or maintain their own garden? Thus, you need this government bureaucracy to collect money collectively, to give to this person, and this is where and of course, no one in any society has ever let another person starve because they were an invalid or anything. Society has always taken care of their own, provided they were not forced to do so.
Right, and it saddens me, because the reason I do this, and you probably know, National Party Chair isn't a paid position. Like there's no paycheck at the end of this road.
You're not making big six figures. I was gonna apply for your job. I guess I'll withdraw it then. I withdraw my application.
it's up for re-election in Orlando, so you can come after me if you want. No, I do it because of my kids. I do it because I care about other people. And whenever somebody tells me, we have to have government do this thing because people wouldn't help other people voluntarily, what I sometimes hear, and I don't know if it's true, and for a lot of people I'm sure it's not true, is it's such a pessimism about other people, or a pessimism about themselves, a pessimism about their very own character, where they feel like, you know what, maybe I wouldn't help a hungry homeless person if no one made me do it. And I have trouble comprehending that point of view because I care about other people. That's why I want other people to be free. And I believe that if everybody has their own garden and, somebody broke their legs and they can't work on their garden, their neighbors will help them. And I believe that people have so much more potential to help in a more effective way. If you look at, for example, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act that passed in Indiana, that allowed more discrimination against gay people than other people, right? That law got changed not because of any government program. Government's what put that discrimination enabler in place. It was individuals, business owners, company representatives, sports players, everybody saying, you know what? That offends my values, and as an individual, I'm not going to go to Indiana anymore on business trips. I'm not going to shop in Indiana. I'm not going to travel to Indiana. I'm going to wear, an armband whenever we play a game that's in Indiana. Individuals taking those individual actions got that law changed so fast, so much faster than it ever passed through the process of government. And that's the sort of beautiful human action that gives me hope that we'll find a way to solve some of these problems that right now are being solved with government solutions, because people really do care about other people. Yeah, there's the occasional evil person who doesn't, who would kick a homeless person rather than give him a hand up. But they're rare, right? That's why when people do terrible things like shoot people, it makes the news, because it's not normal.
Right.
The normal thing in society is not to be violent towards others. It is to help people. And I think that we encourage people to be better by giving them the opportunity to be better. We actually hurt people's character by making it a function of a bureaucracy, of a nameless, faceless bureaucrat and a bunch of regulations to help our fellow man. We don't allow people to raise up their own moral character by helping others.
Right.
There's something good that happens to you when you help someone else, and we deny that to people by passing it through government where it's just somebody's job. And I'm not saying, I know plenty of people, I worked for the government as a public defender, who do work for the government because they want to help somebody, but it is still their job. And so, denying people the opportunity to help people voluntarily just seems needlessly cruel to me.
Yeah.
But that's why I'm a libertarian.
Yeah. Well, I get, we have a stop for break. In fact, we're a little bit late, but I'm going to make this one comment. My wife and I, we give to many organizations, and it sort of gripes me in a way. I say, the government is taking a good portion of our income and giving it, squandering it. It very rarely gets to the people who need it. But these same organizations are asking me for money. And I almost like to write back to them and say, why don't you tell the government to stop the welfare programs, and then I'll start giving to you. Because I'm already giving. I'm being forced to give, involuntarily, and I'm also giving voluntarily. And then, of course, if I give to one organization, next week I get 4 more envelopes, from people saying, and I get mail sometimes. I have to wheelbarrow to bring it in. It's amazing, and most of it's just people asking for money, and many of these organizations get some sort of contribution from the government, which is my money in the first place. Anyway, my frustration. Could you stay with us just for about 60 seconds? We have to stop for station identification and take a little break. All right, please stay with us. Folks, we have with us right now Nicholas Sarwark. He's the Libertarian Party National Chair. We're talking about the Libertarian Party, where it's going, and about the election that's coming up. Please stay with us. We're going to break, and write down this number, 646-652-4620, and call in with your questions or comments. Make sure you press the 1 button so we know that you want to be on the air. Okay, stay with us. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Political talk derived from a historical perspective. Not always palatable, but good food for thought. Pure Libertarian talk with host Joe Cristiano. LibertyTalkRadio.com.
Express Test is your go-to company for on-site occupational health testing services. That's right, we said on-site. That means we will meet you at your facility for a free health and occupational safety consultation. Express Test specializes in hearing conservation, respiratory protection, and employee safety. We can help you establish viable programs tailored to your business and employee needs. For your free consultation, call 918-743-2929 or visit us at expresstest.com. That's 918-743-2929 or expresstest.com.
Ranch Acres Audiology is about caring, about getting the most out of life, about personal attention.
Sometimes helping someone with their hearing is really helping them with more than just hearing. That's the goal of my practice. That's what my goal has been for 20 years.
You're invited to attend our next free Lunch and Learn seminar. Call us today, 918-749-7711.
This isn't your typical talk radio show. This is Liberty. Liberty Talk Radio.
Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to Liberty Talk Radio, America's Libertarian Voice. I'm your host, Joe Cristiano, and with us today we have the Libertarian Party National Chair, Nicholas Sarwark, and we're talking about everything libertarian. And someone in the studio brought up a point. They said that on that Russian television conversation, an interview that you had the other day, you think the Russians are using that as a vehicle to sort of defame the United States because all the front runners are not saying what the Libertarian Party is in fact espousing, and they're saying, look, the United States is really not a free country. They're using that as a propaganda tool?
I think they want to use it. They want to show that there's some opposition to American military supremacy or power being projected overseas. And I'm sensitive to that. And if you go back, you watch this interview or you watch the one from 2015, you know, a lot of what the angle they're trying to take is that the U.S. government is justifying Russian military intervention because the U.S. engages in military intervention. And they want to try and sort of build up Russia. And the point that I usually make, and I have a lot of family in the military, is that just because we are the strongest country in the world, just because we can do these things militarily, doesn't mean we should. You know, that's real power. Real power is the ability to not go to violence, right? You don't have to hit somebody because you're confident. You know, the bullies are always the ones who hit people because they're not confident. And that's sort of the subtle message I'm trying to send, which is, you know, part of the reason Russia has sort of expanded their military hegemony in Eastern Europe is they have so many other things that are sort of going downhill, right? You know, you have this country that used to be this beacon of literature and arts and was where everyone wanted to be. And in the Soviet era, they went a little bit south, and so they're trying to regain former glory through military power, which isn't right, whether it's Russia or the United States doing it. It's not right to go militarily intervene in other countries in a non-defensive way. It's just wrong. And so that's the point I make, and, you know, I'm sure they use it for the reasons they use it for. Yeah.
Now, the Libertarian Party typically, or people in the Libertarian Party who are running for office, typically take a positive approach. They take the libertarian perspective and they present it. What they don't do, and I applaud them for this, by the way, is that they don't talk negatively about the other parties. I mean, if they do, it's not very noticeable. But would it not help for people to tune in to what the major parties are saying if they talk about the hypocrisy of the other parties? For example, you know, the Republicans are always talking about being evangelical Christians and God and Jesus Christ and all this other stuff, and then at the next sentence they talk about, you know, bombing everyone, you know, killing everyone, you know, and you think, well, what a hypocrisy that is. I mean, either you if you're religious, you don't go around killing people. Even if they did wrong, you try them first in a rule of law, and then you impose whatever restrictions on that person to prevent it from happening again. But you don't go around cluster bombing every nation in the Middle East, for example, in North Africa and Eastern Europe, because you perceive that there may be some people there that may be harmful to the United States, and they're only harmful to the United States is because we've been intervening, but that's another story. And then the Democrats are just as hypocritical when they talk about things like, we're going to have free education. Well, as Paul Jacobs wrote just today in his Common Sense article, he says, yes, it's free education for those people who don't pay taxes. So there's all this hypocrisy, and I would love to hear a good retort from the Libertarian Party addressing these issues from the major party perspective. But I don't know if that's fair.
No, it's absolutely fair. One of the things I've been trying to push when I go around and speak to state parties, which is one of the benefits of the job, is I get to speak to libertarians, is the idea that you shouldn't be negative towards other people. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be negative towards positions.
Right.
When I hear a debate, in the last Republican debate I had the dubious honor of watching, where basically there were questions about whether or not you'd be willing to kill children, whether or not you'd be willing to carpet bomb civilians, whether or not you'd be willing to torture, literally it was a debate where half the questions were about what war crimes are you willing to commit. Those are fair points to make, because those positions are just fundamentally evil. I'm not saying that the people are evil. I'm not saying those people are bad, although I would note that most of the people on that stage who are talking about how ruthless they were and how many people they'd be willing to kill hadn't served in the military. And I know that a lot of veterans seem a lot less willing to go and kill people overseas. They understand the reality of what killing means in a way that a lot of our politicians don't seem to. And so I think that it's fair. Not only is it fair, it's respectful to your opponents from the old parties to help the voters understand their position. When someone says, and I don't know if you remember this in the Libertarian Party, there was a push in the late 90s to say, hey, get off this war on drugs thing. It's too fringe. It's too crazy. People are going to think we're lunatics. Mm-hmm. The fringe position is that you have any sort of right to throw me into a cage for what I put in my own body. And so I think it's fair and it's respectful to our old party opponents when they get up on stage and say, I oppose the legalization of marijuana. And you say, well, why don't you tell me and the rest of the debate audience why you think it's right to criminalize an entire generation of young African-American men and lock them in cages away from their families and deny them employment for what they put in their own body? Why don't you tell me why you want to lock people into cages for things that don't hurt anyone else? Explain your position, because that's the fringe position. And if we just be honest and open and respectful about it, that's a solid blow we can strike.
Right.
And I didn't say that that person's a bad person. I didn't call them names. I didn't talk about their hair. I just said, look, this is what you want the voters to vote for. You want them to support you in locking up young men for something they choose to do that doesn't hurt anyone else. So explain why. Just tell them why. What's wrong with that? That's as fair as I can be. And that is so much more effective than this yelling and screaming and fear-mongering and dividing people. It's not necessary. Libertarian policies just make more sense. And when you put Republican and Democrat policies in plain language, they don't make sense. Then we become the only political adults in the room. When you put it in plain language that in spite of the deficit going down, that our national debt is approaching $20 trillion, and this is in spite of an extra $1 trillion in tax revenues the government has actually taken in. So they've got more revenue coming in and still can't balance the books. Then that's the position that doesn't make sense.
Right.
Not ours. Ours makes great sense.
We should do is when it comes to war, which was about my favorite subject, politically, is that I said, fine, let's go to war. But if we go to war, everyone in Congress has got to be on the front line. They have to be the first people going in and have the most those positions which are most vulnerable to being killed. I said, and then we can go to war. And I'll bet you dollars to donuts that there would be peace in the world. They would be voting against it. Oh, by the way, and then you take your children as well. You take your children, regardless of the age, they go with you.
Right. Well, this is the thing that you've learned. Anytime you've had to manage people or anything where you lead people, true leadership comes down to not asking anyone else to do something that you're unwilling to do. Now, that's not saying that I don't make membership renewal phone calls at the national office, but I would. I'm willing to do that. Right. I won't ask other people. Our family has a car dealership here in Phoenix, and I don't ask anyone to do anything at that lot that I wouldn't do myself. Right. I've detailed cars. I've driven cars around to auction. I've fixed cars, even though I'm not really a mechanic. And so I think that goes extra. That point is even more important when what you're asking somebody to do is something where they could potentially lose their life and make orphans of their children and widows of their wives, that you need to make sure it's something you'd be willing to do. And most of the military people I know who are in leadership positions where they don't go to the front lines because that's not a good idea, they still have that willingness where they would do it. If they get caught in an ambush, they are going to fight out with their soldiers. They're not going to put their hands up and surrender. That's not what they're going to do. And I don't know as that level of commitment is shared by a lot of these people who want to send other people's children to die.
Yeah. Now, I believe in equal opportunity sarcasm, because I like to tell Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, as my friend Gerald Slinte would say. Actually, Gerald Slinte and I actually lived on the same street in the Bronx. Would you believe that? Isn't that amazing?
I would.
Yeah, we're the same. Yeah. Anyway, but I like to say, you want free education? That's fine. Tell me, which courses will you teach, and how often will you do so? And of course, you'll be doing it for free, and there's not a snowball chance in hell that they would spend 2 seconds even thinking of that. Anyway, there's more hypocrisy. We have about 15 minutes left. About 10 minutes left. What I'd like to hear from you is, who are our front runners in the Libertarian Party? Could you tell us about them and who's running, and give us a sort of a lineup? Okay,
so the lineup of presidential candidates right now that's recognized by the National Party, and I'm kind of bringing it up, so I'm going by memory, but I'm also looking it up at the same time.
Okay.
Former Governor Gary Johnson, who was our presidential candidate in 2012, former governor of New Mexico, is running for office. He is announced for the Libertarian nomination, I believe, last week. John McAfee, who you've already mentioned, cybersecurity expert, software expert, is seeking the nomination. Steve Kerbell, a gentleman from Colorado Springs, Colorado, he's an insurance businessman, is seeking the nomination. Austin Peterson, who is a former producer for Judge Napolitano's show on Fox Business. He has various websites. He actually worked for the National Party back in 2008. Mark Allen Feldman, a member of the National Committee and a anesthesiologist at the Cleveland Clinic, is seeking the presidential nomination. Darryl Perry from New Hampshire is very active in the Free State movement and some other things, is seeking the nomination. There's a gentleman named Derek Michael Reed from California, Jack Robinson from South Carolina, Brett Smith from Texas, Joy Waymeyer from California, Cecil Ince from Missouri, and John Hale from Kentucky.
Wow.
For a lot of them, I don't know as much about them, or I haven't had the opportunity to meet them, but those are all the candidates who have filed for office with the FEC. They filed their form to say they're seeking the Libertarian nomination. They've joined the Libertarian Party, so they're eligible to be nominated. and they have a dedicated website to the campaign. They're not just, the FEC gets a lot of filings because it's free to file, where people just want to say, I'm running for president. I mean, look at that guy, that kid who filed as D's Nuts, which got actually a lot of public press, which was pretty neat for us because he actually identifies as libertarian. So, but that aren't really seriously seeking the nomination. And that field will probably winnow out as we get closer to Orlando. You'll see that some people are able to raise the money and get the support to travel to state conventions, and others just won't be able to. And so I don't know how many of those people actually show up at the convention.
Yeah. We'll probably have those that come to the convention. I guess we'll be inviting to be on our program.
Yeah, and there are rumors that Jesse Ventura has been considering it.
Yes,
there's been that rumor for about 6 months now, but I haven't had anything.
I would love to see him run.
Sort of hard on that.
Yeah.
And there's a couple other people, like I mentioned. I've talked to some fairly major former major party candidates who have thought about the nomination. But, some of them, when you tell them, look, we don't just give our nomination to people because you're cool. You have to really be libertarian, or,
right.
The way I put it is you have to be libertarian enough that the delegates will support you. Right. Bob Barr is a wonderful person, and I got a chance to talk to him at Freedom Fest when I was there in Las Vegas this last year. He's not libertarian on everything.
Oh, not absolutely,
but it's
right.
libertarian enough that the delegates felt that he was the right choice for president in 2008. And that's what you have to do. But you can't be anti-libertarian on everything and just go, well, look, I'm a big name. I think the party's beyond that. We've sort of grown up as a party. There was a point where we might have lacked enough self-confidence to say, we don't need you. And I think the real growing up point of the Libertarian Party was when Howard Stern offered to run in New York. And it was clear it was more of a publicity stunt for him than it was a real support of the Libertarian Party, and the New York Party turned him down. The same when the Connecticut Party turned down Ann Coulter, who had made mumblings about it, and they said, you're not us.
Ann Coulter is far from libertarian. She's a neocon from the word go.
Ann Coulter, from what I can see and discern from what I read, appears to just be a performance artist.
Yeah.
Her thing is, what can I say that's going to freak people out, and then people freak out about it. And so I kind of ignore her, like most performance artists.
Right. Is there a general libertarian platform that you can verbalize or summarize? I
mean, the best summary that I've heard is actually a construction that I kind of stole from Matt Kibbe, formerly of Freedom Works, and it was the title of his book, which he was nice enough to autograph for me, which is don't hurt people and don't take their stuff. Right. It's what you learned in kindergarten. Dr. Walter Block from Loyola will quibble with me and really, put a finer point on it and say it's don't physically hurt people, don't engage in physical aggression, and don't take their stuff. And then that sort of includes fraud, because what he points out is that you can hurt people by taking business from them. We've had a long discussion about it. I think that when you say hurt in that context, people take it to mean physical violence, as opposed to I stole your woman or whatever.
Right.
To be technically correct, the libertarian principle is you can't physically aggress against somebody else or take their property.
Yeah. Is Jesse Ventura still considering the Libertarian Party nomination, or is he out altogether?
He's still thinking about it. Some of his public statements just aren't going to work. He's said, I want the nomination, but I won't join the party. Well, according to the bylaws, you have to be a member of the party to be nominated on the floor. So as long as I get to hold the gavel, that nomination's out of order. Right. If he wants to run up to the front of the convention hall and give me $25 and join the party, then it might be back in order. But there are certain non-negotiables that he has suggested he doesn't want to abide by.
Is there a reason for that? I mean, to me, it's no big deal because, again, it's a party of principle, and if he believes in the party based on principle, there should be no question about it.
He has the same view as some other, big names, that they want to be so independent that they don't want to wear the libertarian label. And, this is an argument, and I know we're getting close to the end of the show, but, a lot of people say, well, I'm a small L libertarian. Well,
yeah.
If you believe in freedom, then, you believe in human liberty. You believe that people should have the right to pursue happiness however they want, as long as they don't hurt people and take their stuff. Why are you putting a small L on it? Right. The size, when it comes to the size of the L, when it comes to whether or not you're actually going to identify with your principles in the political realm, size matters. And the big L is more important than the little L. Don't talk to me about you're going to support a big government Republican politician, but in your heart, you believe in libertarianism. Famously, I've heard this said that David Bergland once ran into somebody at a cocktail party when he was running for president. And the guy said, in my heart, I'm libertarian. And Bergland looked at him and said, let me know when it gets to your balls.
Oh, well put. Oh, my goodness gracious.
I'm not suggesting everybody can use that line.
Yeah, right.
To pull it off and not get hit.
Yeah. Well,
but that is, to put a fine point on it, that's the difference between people who actually put their money and their time and their sacred honor behind these principles, and those who like to talk about it at cocktail parties because it makes them sound cool.
Right. Well, I opened up the studio. I own the whole studio. I bought all the equipment. I have, a booking agent. I have a board operator and all that. And I can't tell you how much money I'm making on this deal. I would have right now a boat in Florida somewhere if I didn't have the studio, because it comes out of my own pocket primarily. And
it's a labor of love.
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't know. I think my wife would just chastise me if I stopped doing this. She said, "You have to do this." She said, "This is what you've done for many years. This is your passion. You're going to do it. And if we have to work to support it, we'll work to support it. And that's it. And that's a principle. Bingo." And I've been doing this now for about 14 years. But as a result, some of the advantages of it is I've had the opportunity to meet some wonderful people, and I have relationships with people basically all around the world, and it's been gratifying. I said, without this program, I would just be a guy sitting here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I got transferred here from Houston via New York, but I would just be sitting around, just not meeting anyone, actually, just doing anything local. So it's been a great journey, and I hope to continue doing it as long as I can.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. This has been great, and the work that you're doing, this is how libertarianism wins over time. Is libertarians care more. When I was a public defender, we would talk about, the prosecutors have all the police. They have the judges that typically rule in their favor. All we had was that we worked for individual people fighting for their freedom, and we just cared more about it. So we worked harder. We got up earlier, we stayed up later. We went and visited the jail on Saturdays, and that's what lets you win, is we have something that you can really get behind. And the Republicans and the Democrats, they just don't have that anymore. You don't have a strong labor movement anymore. You don't have anti-slavery anymore. You don't have the things that animated people into those parties and made them, bleed Republican or bleed Democrat. But people still bleed Libertarian because it's so beautiful.
Yeah.
And so I'm so glad for what you're doing. I really, really appreciate this opportunity.
Well, I appreciate you. The only thing that bothers me is there are more and more people relying on the government, some sort of government program, and when a libertarian says, "Hey, we're going to do away with these programs," you're taking people's lifeblood away from them, and you're saying, "Hey, grow up. We're not going to enable you anymore. You have to stand on your own 2 feet. You have a lot more to offer than to just take money from somebody else and exist." And people have a hard time making that conversion, and that's really sad for America.
Well, they do, but what you have to do, one of the things Arvin Vohra, our vice chair, talks about, you have to talk about benefits, not principles. You talk about benefits. So you don't talk about, it's just philosophically wrong to throw people in cages for what they put in their body. What you talk about is, if the police weren't chasing people for smoking weed, then they could actually go out and fight violent crime
Right.
and keep your family safer and keep my family safer. And wouldn't that be better? So you don't talk about, hey, it's wrong to take money from me to give it to somebody else. You talk about, if we reduce these barriers and you were able to start your own business, or you were able to get an entry-level job,
Right.
you could work yourself up. And that's an opportunity that the state is denying you, because all the arguments economically, unemployment-wise, about minimum wage, the minimum wage is not the minimum wage. The minimum wage is zero. And all you do by taking the legal minimum wage and moving it up is you mean more people are going to be at zero.
Right.
So if you can jump high enough to grab that bottom rung, well, then you do get a better deal. But there are a lot of people who, through other structural problems in society and other things the government has done, they can't jump that high. And so in an argument to help them, you're actually taking away some of their potential.
Right. Absolutely.
But, one of the things that Mark Feldman talks about is, let's focus less as libertarians on limited government, and let's focus more on the corollary, which is unlimited individuals. That's what we're really about, is limitless individuals, not limited government, unlimited human potential.
Yeah. Opportunity. Well, thank you so much for being on our program. I do hope you will accept our invitation to return at a later date and give us an update.
Absolutely. I'd love to.
Okay, Nicholas, you've been a great guest. Thank you so much for being here on Liberty Talk Radio.
Thank you so much.
Right. Bye-bye
Have a
now.
great day.
All right, folks, this is the end of today's broadcast. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the financial support, and we'd like to thank you for listening in. You can further the cause of liberty by recommending this program to your friends, and let us hear from you. Our email address is comments@libertytalkradio.com. Remember, as my wife would say, you're either allowing your liberties to be taken away or you're striving to protect them. Unfortunately, folks, there is no middle ground. Until next time, this is Joe Cristiano. You've been listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Stay well. Stay tuned.